The methods to confirm that honey is pure and authentic are abundant, and from very diverse approaches thanks to technological progress in diagnosis, detection, and quantification. Physicochemical: magnetism, optics, acidity, moisture, sugars. Biological: enzymes, proteins, amino acids. Spectrometric: ultraviolet, infrared, nuclear magnetic resonance, chromatography, masses, liquids, gases. Genomics and metabolomics. The compositional richness of honey lends itself to several angles of authentication. Flavonoids, polyphenols, antioxidants, 10 sugars, some unique to the blossom species, minerals from the plant, the terroir. Vitamins. Specific amino acids and proteins from bees, pollen, and even from mishandling. Polyphenols, alkaloids, fatty alcohols, functional compounds, and volatile compounds. Honey is a very complex biome interactions for anyone to imitate it. Our beekeeping skills exchange its loyalty from the hand of nature. Regretfully, counterfeiting dominates world trade today. Commercial interests involved at origin and destination, laboratories gone for profit, importers and packers involved in global trade, who certainly know that absurdly cheap is hardly authentic. Honey is among the 3 most adulterated foods on the planet, with olive oil and wine. Who is ultimately taking the market price losses of real honey if counterfeiting makes 50% of the international trade volume at 10% the cost? Who will take authorial responsibility to combat this food crime? Who shall take on them that fraud does not exist, that the product is not usurped, abused, debased, adulterated, the bees, the consumers, the beekeepers? Who is to be concerned with copyright protection, assume the duty, and exercise the corresponding rights? We, the Guild of Beekeepers, are the ones who have a long-time problem, one that we must stop or perish, with the bees that so much depend on us. Recognizing the problem as ours is a starter to solving it. We, from our being beekeepers, from having Apimondia as a World of Beekeeping representative, from our being associated, we must strengthen the action, because as of today, fraud is beating authentic. Financially motivated adulteration is a criminal fraud. To know exactly this behavior that harms us so much, we must look at internal and external adulteration. Both require updated standards that clearly help to assess the authenticity and classify fraud and adulteration as a crime and hold the actors responsible, not only to the sporadic actions of nomadic sellers on low-income markets, but to the retailer and the packer, as fraud has been discovered as dominant in India, Australia, and Great Britain, where 100% of retail brands and the main were found not pure, and despite media scandals, no record of anyone even being fined. Beekeepers and their associations may consider whether to create lines of action for consumer service, simplify the predicament where detecting if a jar of honey is fake costs the price of 50 jars, a national support system providing coverage to the domestic market with support experts with authenticity, predictive screening, and sensory analysis, or analysis techniques into the smartphone as an ultraviolet reflectance app. Organizing the defense by achieving official changes is the task of those responsible for the authorship of honey, as we should look at ourselves. Adulteration in international markets is already approaching half of international trade. Without laboratory analysis, only by examining the international trade figures, we can see in the global figure of value how New Zealand has 25% more value with 15% of the China volume, thanks to Manuka. Argentina, 50% of the tonnage and 90% of the China value. Countries that export pure honey, Argentina, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, and Uruguay, were noticeably higher in 2014, but by mid-2015 to 2020, the iceberg popped out of the ocean and all were forced to be sold at or below cost. We identify them as pure because in 2014, back in 2021, and half of 2022, they sold over $3,400 while the fake origins stay always below $2,200 and even up to $1,100. They're China, Vietnam, India, Ukraine,
Taiwan, and Thailand. Some other re-exporting fake as Poland, Belgium, and Spain. The reason that among adulterators some sell for 2,000 metric ton and others for 1,000 is because they have two main ways of committing fraud. The first, for around $1,000 MT, is 100% false and very cheap, discovered thanks to the China's sincerity or audacity announcing fructose syrup that passes the C3C4 test, which is also already being made in India. The syrup raw material comes from C3 plants, generally rich in starches such as rice, potato, cassava, wheat, tapioca, which are hydrolyzed as it is done with corn syrup, but without the complication of the latter, that is C4. The second way to falsify is the opposite to a fully wax-capped gum as is honey. It savagely exploits the bees, extracting the daily forage of nectar at 40% humidity to dehydrate it in special factories, and it is sold at 1,800 a metric ton. It contains ethyl alcohol and glycerin. It naturally lacks the properties that bees confer to honey while maturing and capping. Mature honey has received compounds from bees and has played a role in the stability and harmony of the hive, which goes into extreme levels of anxiety when daily nectar is stolen to lay idle fermenting until sent to a factory. Now let's talk about the main importing countries where the fake dominates. The US imports both fake categories, yet is looking to tighten control. Vietnam sold the false syrup under the supervision of the Chinese until a new USP and true source regulation appeared. India, after government supervision and CSE discovery of C3 syrups, now exports mostly the factory dehydrated nectar, which is still to be recognizable by NMR. The most shadowy area is the 50% of honey used as an ingredient in products, which makes it difficult to unmask the fraud. Japan, alleged creator of the early extraction of nectar until a 50% duty was set on any import with more than 20% moisture. Then dehydration passed to China, pays 1,800 to 2,000 per MT, and it accounts for nearly 60% of its imports. It has potential territory for 14,000 tons, but produces max 5,000 as the market is destabilized by the extent of cheap imports. European Union. Germany is the country with the highest proportion of pure honey in its imports, and Italy, Poland, Spain, Benin, the first three important producers, seem to import false for cheap internal and re-export to other countries. It is China's lowest price destination, despite a high tariff of 25%. The EU as a bloc is the second largest producer in the world. It consumes most of its local honey, but imports a very large amount, half pure honey and the other half adulterated, to sell and or export at low prices. This region concentrates the majority of knowledge about honey, so it is where it hurts the most to see authenticity crushed. Minor but large importer blocs, when added, are Saudi Arabia, mostly a pure honey importer, but in doubtfully low levels, South Africa, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Portugal, presumably destined for Spain just as France used Belgium, for markets with low purchasing power whose consumers go for the natural medicine but take home a fraudulent syrup. In all countries, beekeepers are starting to feel the pinch, just like in Great Britain, a country where Latin American beekeepers showed how adulteration is present in the lowest priced jars across all retailers' shelves. The United Kingdom has received the most internal media attention without authenticity being able to win the battle and imposters or authorities brought to accountability. It imports almost 40,000 tons a year of honey for a mere $1,100 freight included. Looking at the pillars of this crime, perhaps it will help us strategize how to shake them and eventually bring down the edifice of fraud. First, the slow motion impact in the health of the human being by not consuming honey, which causes the lack of interest of the states, both in border and domestic controls, which gives rise to the existence of parallel markets, one for the poor, with low-quality products that are dangerous to health, and to the rich, the authentic one. Poor and false analysis in the midst of the compositional richness of honey and the scientific abundance of methods. The commercial world of honey rests on the EALC IRMS C3C4 analysis. It is fair to call it the false passport, the cover-up
that since 2008 has supported fraud with C3 syrup. The immense supply of raw material for fraud. Compare the 2 million tons of honey in the world with the 2,400 million tons of wheat, beets, cassava, rice, and potatoes to prepare C3 syrup. The tendency to purchase all food in supermarkets or discounters, which hold amazing power and in some cases turn against consumers. Aldi and Lidl would never sell us honey in Germany the quality they sell in the UK. Fair practice producers are continually threatened of being eliminated if they do not agree to lower prices or pay high prices for shelf space. The last pillar on which the honey fraud rests has two components of human behavior: greed of the criminals and the stunning impotence of those affected. Pashakwat, the Incan builder, said in his Quechua language, Amasua, Amalula, Amakela, the battle for the truth with the truth. We must now look for the positive, hopefully transformation of the current scenario, so not to be forensic doctors of our own agony. In countries like Mexico, beekeepers fought in courts and succeeded in preventing the planting of GMO corn and soybeans. The comprehensive defense strategy seeks to achieve the transformation experience, linking four aspects with determination. First, have a social and ecological base. We have at least 300,000 affected beekeepers on the planet, and what the German scientist Roger Moore has made clear, the main cause of bees extinction will be the collapse of the honey market. Bees need their caregivers to avoid pests, pesticides, and loss of territory. 2. Have solid scientific base in proposals. A simple test that are of reach to the consumer, reduce the risk of deception with a support system from the Beekeepers Guild, generate consumer confidence and the visibility of local beekeepers. Border controls that are mandatory, an insurmountable barrier that uses all the existing scientific repertory of methods. While there are only 3 commercial groups of laboratories that dominate 90% of the world market and perform an estimated 10 integrity tests, out of these 10, there is one that is applied in 90% of the cases, the fake passport. On the other hand, there are 150 scientists, teams of authors published in peer-reviewed journals of analytical methods for authenticity, which could expand the universe of analysis. We should lead them to join the transformation effort by accrediting their methods with their national certification entities. With their current laboratories, plus these new teams of scientific specialists and their methods accredited, Apimondia suggested to assume responsibility for copyright protection and proposed to the World Organization for Animal Health and the World Customs Organization an authenticity protocol to be applied at all borders, which shall contain iterative unbreachable Apimondia system applied by the Customs Border Control Officer. The system orders a random choice of analysis per container. The importer declares the warehouse that in max 3 days shall be visited by an accredited person who samples 5% of the drums in homogeneous honey and 10% in non-homogeneous honey. Send the samples to the accredited laboratories with the tests, for results to be then sent to authenticity control and importer. Costs of the new border control include analysis, no significant change in the cost, sampling, accredited students in similar programs in educational institutions close to the designated warehouse under a simple protocol. Estimated costs shall be 15 to 20% of the analysis. As to time, it will say max 25 to 30 minutes. Another aspect of scientific work are the arguments and evidence of economic damage, damage to health, and ecological risk, which supports the complete transformation agenda to be proposed to international organizations, to the local executive and legislative powers, and on which to base judicial action in the most corrupted markets. The health aspect is very important. In these articles, the authors review scientifically proven healing properties of honey. A third strategy point is the media and social media narrative, to make visible the facts, the collective risks, and the behavior of parties, government agencies, and fraud perpetrators. The media will follow the story of the transformation. Bees are an essential part of the human food supply. People are aware. We have to tell the story right, and it will be thoroughly magnified. The anti-GMO struggle was hugely followed. All the media gave beekeepers position. Even filmmakers have already made documentaries. But we must be clear, the objective is that the market is cleaned of fraud, not to get media attention or build distrust. The fourth, claim in courts with all legal channels. The first are class or collective actions with injunction, which is the most powerful and feasible in the countries where it is most needed. This legal route obliges the judge to respond in due time and is obliged to assess the evidence of irreparable damage and apply eventually the requested injunction. In our case, it would be the application of border sampling as indicated. Anti-dumping or trade remedies proceedings, which are completely different from the previous one, since it is within the Trade Department of the executive branch of government. The Americans have already set the example. Nobody has knocked on the door of the United Kingdom trade remedies or the European Union. The third are complaint processes in the laboratory accreditation entities to demonstrate the falsity of the analysis, which we hereby briefly explain. The founding article of the method describes how they start from a universe of samples, and their step 1 is to define as pure honey those jar samples that comply with 11 analyses, and in this criterion, only 451 of their samples were pure. Then, in a second step that would become the new analysis, they apply to liquid chromatography to element analysis, coupled to mass spectrometry for isotopic ratios, and from the maximum differences in the quantification of the isotopic ratios C13 and C12, they define purity in sole terms of this second step as a single analysis, instead of the 11 that define pure honey.
And we all believe them, but look at the graph. These 11 samples from the English shelf, the private labels of all the major stores and the main brand. They do not pass at least 7 of the 11 analyses, but they do pass the isotopic ratio quantification. The contradiction is the backbone of the current fraud. Finally, we must build an international team in charge of applying the global strategy in its various aspects and its financing. Norberto Garcia has calculated the damage to world beekeepers and it already exceeds $1 billion. We must find the way that beekeepers community and true players in the market invest in the solution. How much is it reasonable to invest so as not to lose another $1 billion? Our proposal is for Apimondia to create the necessary commissions to transform the current scenario before it sinks us. Honey, our work and our families deserve our action.